Now, a major Quebec Superior Court ruling against the Montreal police and the city of Montreal this week. The court declaring that there's a systemic form of racial profiling within the SPVM, and it awarded $5,000 in punitive damages to anyone who was stopped on the streets based on their ethnic origin. In the 100-page ruling, Justice Dominic Poulin recognizing that Montreal police, and by extension the city of Montreal, were responsible for systemic racial profiling. It opens the door for financial compensation to anyone pulled over or questioned without cause by the SPVM between 2017 and 2019. This case was launched back in 2017 by the Montreal Black Coalition following the violent arrest of one man as he left a bar on Saint-Jacques Street. Let's now go to Akil Alleyne, a regular on the Big Five at 9:05, and he's also manager of the GemStar Circle of Excellence program, a topic we'll get to a little later on in this interview. Akil, welcome back to the show.
Greetings, Elias. Always a pleasure.
How do you view this ruling this week? 2017 to 2019, the awarding of $5,000 in punitive damages, very important in that sentence there. What's your reaction when you hear about this ruling?
I think it's a step in the right direction. Obviously, there's still a lot more that needs to be said and done on this subject, but it is good to hear a judicial body in this province state outright that there is a systemic problem with racial profiling on the Montreal police force. That definitely needed to be identified and pointed out by the highest authorities possible, especially in the judicial system, the legal system itself. Lord knows communities affected by policing, the Black community, the Indigenous community, communities of color in general, have been saying this for generations here in Montreal as elsewhere across North America and around the world to some extent. But it's good to hear a judge actually find that same, reach that same conclusion. One thing I will say, though, is that I noticed, and this sort of brings back to mind a lot of the things that I've noted in these legal cases involving police discrimination or police misconduct of any kind. The requirement in this case is that the city pay out these punitive damages to the people affected by racial profiling during the time frame. And while that's certainly better than nothing, I, for years now, really wanted to see in all countries that have these issues with systemic police discrimination, to see the actual police departments themselves be directly affected in terms of their budgets, because all too often there have been cases in the past elsewhere in North America and other cities where sometimes police will engage in blatant acts of police misconduct, rough people up, abuse them for no reason, and then literally tell them to their faces, go ahead and sue the department, go ahead and sue the city and get $1 million for all we care. We don't care. It's not going to affect us. There needs to be change at the level of police discipline.
Akil, obviously, and for our listeners, you've lived for some time in the United States. You know both sides of the border here. Have you been a victim of this a victim of this yourself?
I myself, I wouldn't say so, because I certainly never been arrested or handcuffed by police myself. I have been stopped while driving, and I remember one time I was actually driving my mother's car in NDG and was pulled over, and the interaction with the police was courteous, I have to say. I've been fairly lucky on this front, but I do remember wondering what it was that I did that attracted their attention in the first place, and the reason they gave me at the time was, well, we saw a young man driving a car that was registered to another person, to an elderly woman. And it was interesting because I was coming up the street, up Girard in NDG. They were coming down Girard towards Sherbrooke. And then I turned right onto Sherbrooke. The cop car, which I had seen ahead of time at the intersection, turned left and came right behind me and pulled me over. And it just wasn't enough time for them to... It wasn't as if they could just look at the car and immediately know that it was registered to my mother, right? So I remember wondering, what was it that made them decide to look up the information on this particular car? And
seems like the excuse was found after the fact.
That's the thing. Yeah. That's the thing. I tended to have that suspicion, so much so that I think I remember reaching out to a bunch of my friends on Facebook to ask them, what would you have thought in this situation? And Most of them, of course, agreed. Yeah, I think you were basically racially profiled. I don't know that it would have been provable in that case.
Yeah,
Right? That's the thing about the way the legal system works. It's not always provable.
And that's the thing, right? Because if you're going to get $5,000 in punitive damages here, there's going to have to be some sort of proof, I guess, before they just hand out $5,000. Now, Akil, I want to tackle this story, and this is, and I think our listeners, when you come on the Big Five, I think one of the reasons you're so appreciated on the show is because I think you could see different perspectives here. So I want to ask you a question about this subject in a different way. This week in Canadian some political circles, social media circles, there has been a discussion on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and the report that was done on missing and murdered Indigenous women, and some of it went down the path of racial profiling by police, and how the racial profiling by police has to stop in order to protect Indigenous communities. And at the same time, some people have brought up that if you look at the stats for last year, it's just shy of 90% of murdered Indigenous women were murdered by Indigenous men. So there's an argument to be made. Well, if you want to protect Indigenous women, you might need to profile Indigenous men, and that there's a greater good that comes out of that. This is a murky thing, and I would just love to know, how you tackle this. That's a difficult subject, right? That some people can make the case, well, you're going to need some profiling to deal with serious subjects sometimes, like missing and murdered Indigenous women. How do you view that? Because sometimes this is not just as cut as dry as we like to make it seem.
You're quite right that these issues are complex, and that always needs to be taken into account. I don't know that kind of reality requires or justifies profiling per se. I have yet to be convinced that profiling is necessary in order to combat those kinds of problems. Mm-hmm. Now, that's the kind of argument you often hear in the States. You mentioned earlier the time I spent in the States. Whenever the subject of police brutality comes up, certainly on that side of the border, you'll always hear folks on the more pro-police side of things saying, well, look at the problem of black-on-black crime. Most black lives that fall victim to violent crime are taken by other black people. And so, this is a problem that's internal to the black community. You can't blame it on the police, yada, yada, yada. What folks who are advocates of police reform always point out in response to that, and I think this is correct, first of all, most crime tends to happen within ethnic groups because people who are members of the same cultural community, especially in a country with its history of systemic residential segregation like the United States, you're more likely to come into contact with people of your own background. And therefore, those are the people you're more likely to either commit crimes against or fall victim to crime from. So it's not as if there's some unique propensity of people in any particular community to commit crimes against other members of the same community. Most white people who are victims of crime are victimized by other white people as well. So that's something that also needs to be taken into account and borne in mind. But ultimately, I think that problems like the problems of abduction of Indigenous women and girls can be solved without profiling Indigenous men per se. Obviously, if a majority of the perpetrators happen to be Indigenous men, then that needs to be kept in mind when we're looking at the arrest statistics and so on. Mm-hmm. But one thing that also needs to be kept in mind is if Indigenous communities feel targeted unfairly by police forces, which they frequently are across Canada, they're not going to feel comfortable reporting a lot of these crimes to the police. And so if you want the cooperation of the communities involved, you might want to avoid profiling.
And that's the thing which is so interesting is if you talk to Fadi Daguerre, the Montreal chief of police, he's so focused on community policing. It's one of the things that how he got the job in Montreal, the success he had in Longueuil. But there have been court rulings that have gone against how the way the SPVM does things, where he's pushed back upon it, right? So, listen, it's a complex subject. Akil, before I have to let you go, whenever you come on the Big Five or just now, I mentioned you're the manager of the GemStar Circle of Excellence. It's a scholarship program, and it's a real good news story. I want to take a moment here to talk about the GemStar Circle of Excellence because this is an important time for that program. Tell our listeners.
Yes, indeed. And thanks for the opportunity. The GemStar Circle of Excellence program is a scholarship and mentorship program for high achieving grade 11 students in Montreal's Black community, in the community here on the island of Montreal and the surrounding area. In a nutshell, the students who are accepted into the program spend the whole school year participating in monthly workshops, some remote, some in person, in which they're taught skills that are critical to their educational development. That includes study habits, taking exams, job applications, CGIP application seminars and workshops. But we also work on the personal side. We try to help with students' personal development and emotional and psychological development as well. So we also have programs and activities to foster students' mental health, their socializing skills, their ability to deal with people of different backgrounds and things of that nature as well. We're heading into our third year of the program this year, this 2024 to 2025 school year. And just to make it clear, to be eligible, each student applicant must be a grade 11 student with a high academic standing. They have to be either on their school's honor roll or have at least an 80% average, a member of the Black community with demonstrated involvement in the community, and they have to be a Canadian citizen or landed immigrant. The application deadline is September 19th, Thursday, September 19th, 2024. And you can find all of the information in detail that's necessary at our website, GemStar, that's GEMSTAR, Circle of Excellence, all one word, .com. All the information is there in
Perfect.
detail, and we are accepting applications right now up until September 19th.
I just did the
and
Google.
I should also mention, of course, like I said, it's a scholarship and mentorship program. So students who successfully complete the program at the end of the year and also meet our academic standards will be rewarded with scholarship awards of $1,500 each toward their CGEP education.
And I just did the Google search, GemStar Circle of Excellence, popped up right away, first result. So for anyone interested in helping that grade 11 student apply for that program, that's how you can find it. Akil, listen, we've got to leave it there. Thanks so much.
Thank you.